Welcome back to the Engineered Angler. I'm playing around with this vibratory table only because I put it out there as a teaser on Facebook and I got a bunch of questions. But just to let you know, before I get on to the main topic of today's pro tip, this is an experiment in process. So hopefully it'll work out, but right now, not so much. So the main topic today is going to be hook rash. I'm talking about all those little scratches and mars you get on your brand new paint job, on your precious lures. And if you're like me and you make a bunch and then you store them in batch boxes like this, if you store them with the hooks already installed, you're going to get little tiny scratches all over them. It's hard to prevent. Most lure makers and even just lure users know that there's one common way that folks use to protect the lures from the scratches is using this little tiny thin nylon or rubber little 1/8 inch air hose. So typically folks use this kind of hose. You can see there's not much to it. It's pretty thin walled and has a small internal diameter. So what you would have to do with your lure is to cut a little piece of hose, just the length of that back turn on your hook. That's about 1/4 inch, just slightly larger than 1/4 inch. So I'll go ahead and just measure with my finger. You cut them, you have to cut one for each hook, and then you have to install them one at a time. And sometimes they don't stay on there and you end up losing them, and since they're clear they fall all over the floor, and when I sweep, I'm sweeping up ball bearings and these little things all over the place. So I wanted to come up with something just slightly different, although I have to give kudos to whomever thought up this little tube idea. It really was a pretty elegant solution. So while the rubber tube was a really clever idea and works really well for, let's say, a size number 6 on up to probably as large as 6/0, when you get down to sizes 8, 10, and even smaller, the 12 and 14 little micro hooks, putting this on is essentially impossible. They won't stay on. The inside diameter is too big. So I came up with a little different way of doing it, and it would work for all of them. It isn't as aesthetically pleasing, but let me show you what I'm talking about. So I came up with an alternative method, mostly to avoid the added work of putting one guard on each one hook. So I came up with using this. Now this stuff is called a backer rod, and it's a kind of insulation. It's meant for pushing into gaps and grooves in structures and for concrete expansion joints. This is 5/8. It's a soft foam rubber, and you can get it in bags like this. This is 20 feet long. It was about $4.50 US. I got it at the local home improvement store. And the way you use it is real simple. So what you do is you cut a disc about the length of the little hose you would have normally cut anyway. And then you lay it on its flat side and you cut from the center one stroke out, and you get a little bit of a slice, and you grab your hook, push it down into there, and you end up with a perfectly protected hook. So that gives you something you can use on the smallest of hooks, because you can buy this stuff in tiny diameters if you're really going that way. This is 5/8. It's good for a number 8 on down, but if you want smaller ones, you can buy smaller ones. For bigger hooks, you're going to need larger diameter backer rod. Now they make this stuff as big as 3 inches or maybe even bigger, and it's the same deal. You just cut off your disc, you slice from the center out, and then you just slide your hook in through that slot and embed the tips in the foam, and you've got a nice protected hook that won't scratch or hook you. Now granted, this is not the most aesthetically pleasing way to do it, but if you're just storing lures just for your own use or for long-term storage before you go sell it, it's quick and easy. You can reuse these. It's hard to lose them if you drop it. It's easy to find. And if you're just making a few of them, you can make your own. Just take a piece of one of these extra large noodles and using a piece of tubing, whether it's PVC or steel, and just putting a really mild edge on it. It doesn't take much. PVC is real easy to work with. And what I like to use for a quick edge is one of these deburring tools. You can pick one up real cheap. It's typically used for plumbing, and you just spin it on there a couple of times and it creates a pretty good edge. You can see it. And then all you do is you pick a spot, you just spin it a little bit with your hand and push it through the material until you hit the bottom. And then there it is. And depending on the size hook you're going to use this on, you just up the diameter of your tube and you make the size that you want to use, and it makes it real easy to have these handy, and you just cut the disc out as you need it and put it on your hooks. But if you still like the single hook, single protector concept, I've got another way that I'm doing it, so let me show you that. So what I'm doing is I'm using these tiny cylinders of soft plastic that I've cored out of lures that I don't even use anymore, and you can see on this one the holes that I've cored out. This method is really inexpensive and real easy, and all you have to do is take that little cored out piece of rubber and slide it over your hook, and you end up with a pretty decent looking soft alternative to the hose. So you can cut these little cylinders any size you want to for any hook you want. All you got to do is change the diameter of the little coring tube, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So to core these little guys out, I'm using a little piece of stainless steel tubing now. Here's another little tip. Stainless steel tubing is hard to find. You can buy it online, but it's expensive and you got to buy it in big sections. But if you just need like 1/4-inch tube, these are straws. Now that everyone's pushing not to use plastic straws, you can buy stainless steel straws. I bought 6 for like $4. So to turn them into a little coring bit, what I did was to sharpen one end. And let me show you how I did that. You put one end into your drill chuck, and using a sanding block or just a piece of sandpaper on a hard surface. Here I'm using a little emery board, and all you need to do is lay it up there, and after just a few moments you end up with a nice sharp edge. Let me show you. And then just for comfort, to make a handle, you can take a piece of dowel, or you can, like me, use a dud casting from a lure that you never ended up using, and that makes for a nice handle. I recommend that you drill all the way through so that if the little rubber gets stuck in there, you can just poke it out with a rod. Here's a lure I just don't like and I don't use, and I got a bunch of them. I get a lot of people giving me old soft plastics that I then remelt and turn into other lures. But then you get into the thickness of the lure that you need. Make sure that there's no foil in there, or maybe a slot for the hook that'll end up being discontinuous through. And here you can see it got stuck in there, so I'm just going to shove it through, and there it is. And all I got to do now, slide it onto the hook tip, make sure I get beyond the bar and get the whole hook into that rubber so it's nice and safe. Now if you don't have a bunch of lures laying around, you can take old lures that are useless and then melt them down, create a little slab, and you got the same thing. And now I can take this and I can just core out what I need from this slab, pull out the little cylinder, and there it is. If it's too long, you can always cut it. For bigger hooks, you're going to need a larger diameter cylinder. Now you don't have to use steel, you don't have to use aluminum, you can use plastic. This is actually the body of an old mechanical pencil, and I did the same thing. I stuck it on my chuck and then I sanded a nice sharp edge, and then I'll just create a handle with this dowel, and there you go. And then all I have to do is to shove this down through the plastic, and then this bigger diameter is better for these bigger lures like this 1/0, and you can see it creates a nice protective little sheath. And even though you have to make these yourself, it's quick to make. You can make them ahead of time, and you can use material that you would probably have thrown away. So as a recap, just remember, The clear plastic tube is really good. The only thing is that it's really work intensive. You got to cut each one of those little things and put one on each one of the hooks. So I personally prefer the backer rod. It's simple, it's quick, you get one for hook. Even though it's aesthetically not very pleasing, it does the job. You can reuse them and you don't have to worry about them falling and being lost. They stay on that hook. Using the soft plastic is just another version of the tube, but at least you probably have the materials on hand and it's quick and easy to make. And if you lose a few, who cares? Anyway, thanks for watching. If you're enjoying these tips, let me know. And if you'd like me to cover something in particular, let me know that too. Subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next video.